for. Oh, there we go, Carlos. I was waiting for the little voice in my head. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for responding to the surveys. Thank you for sending all the great stuff that you've been sending to Carlos, so that way he can make sure that we all get it on Fridays. Before we jump right in, I want to go around and ask you guys to give me one word as to how you are arriving today. Doesn't have to be super lengthy, just one word is fine. I will start with Vernon, Mr. Ricks, because you are the first one I see on my screen, good sir. So I'm going to go with you. One word on how you're arriving today.
Above ground.
That's it. That's all we can ask for. Ms. Branson, you're the next one I see. How about you? How you feeling today? Yeah, there we go. Jen, how about you in this beautiful view that you're giving us, which I'm not sure if it's a fake background or a real one, but your hair is swaying, so I'm going to say it's real. There we go.
It's my
How are you?
Yeah, it's good. And I'm joining you wet. I just got off of my bike training for Bike to the Beach. So this is what you get.
Hey, I appreciate it anyway. Eric, I love your shirt. How are you feeling today? Give me one word as to how you're coming in today.
Splendid.
There we go. There we go. Miss Hudson, big hair, don't care. How you feeling?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks, Alan.
Yep. Shabab, always good to see you. How are you feeling?
Doing well. Feeling grateful today.
There we go. There we go. Justice, my brother. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm cooking. So be off camera.
Whatever you got to do. Chief Patel, how about you? How are you feeling today, sir?
Technically challenged. I'm working off my phone right now, but we'll go with technically challenged while I get the my computer set up. Good evening.
There we go. We will make it work. We will make it work. Carlos, how about you? How are you feeling today?
I'm good. I'm going to copy Shabab and say, trying to practice some gratitude.
There we go. I like that. Susan, how about you?
How are you today? I was going to say reluctant, but only because I got back from the Smokies and been hiking and fishing and all that kind of stuff. But I'll just say grateful too, because I was happy to have that opportunity, and it's good to see you all.
There we go. There we go. Vice Chair, Ms. Salazar, our resident pregnant, soon-to-be mama. How are you feeling?
I am feeling very tired, but very grateful.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. Sergeant Brewer, how about you? How are you feeling? I see that you are here, but you're off camera, which is totally fine. Oh, no, you're on camera. Sorry about that.
I'll be on and off. I'm also cooking, eating, and I'm stealing Jen's. I was also on a bike as well. So I'm just stole everybody's, but I'm here.
There we go. There we go. We make it work. Thank you guys for that. I am arriving humbled to be here with you all as always. For those of you who are not commissioners, please write your name in the chat so Carlos can take attendance. So that way Carlos can make sure he captures that. Let's jump right in. You all received the agenda. We will start with an approval of the last meeting's minutes. Do I have any changes that need to be made to the minutes from the June 1st PAC meeting? That is a first, guys. Look at that. That is a first. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Carlos, minutes are approved from the June 1st meeting. Okay. So for the next item on our agenda is the PAC summer schedule. So you guys got the email from Carlos where Nadia and I would love to meet with you guys a little bit more frequently as we kick up this work a little bit. However, we wanted to also clarify, because I think there was some confusion. The second meeting will not be an incredibly lengthy meeting. It will be like a 30-minute meeting. And per an email that we received from Justice, who had a really good point, our hope is that when we get back to finally being able to be in person, which will hopefully be in the fall, right? That first meeting will hopefully be in person. That second meeting will be virtual, because I do not think it makes sense for us to all come together just for a 30-minute meeting, right? We can do that via Zoom or via whatever. So per the survey results that we got from you guys, our next meeting, which is the 30-minute meeting, is next Monday, the 20th. And Carlos, let me know if I'm right about that, the 26th. Yep. And then in August, Carlos, remind me of the dates again, I'm sorry.
The 9th and the 23rd, both Mondays.
Yep, the 9th and the 23rd. Now, I will also stress this to you. If you have vacation plans, take them. If you're going to the beach, do not feel like you need to be on on a call with us. Okay, take your vacation. It is absolutely important. It's been a tough year, and you all should take your vacation as much as you need to. The hope is that us splitting them in 2 weeks like that, so one at the beginning and then one closer to the end, and the shorter meeting being closer to the end will allow us to move some stuff along a little bit. Say we have any outstanding requests or just updates that are time sensitive, we can share them that way. Does anybody have any questions about that before we go to the next agenda item? No? Okay. So let's jump right into our subcommittee updates. And I'm going to pass this over to Nadia, who's going to chair this portion of it. Nadia, you're up.
Okay, everyone. So I'm also on the road. I'm about to get to a stable place where I can turn my camera on. So just give me about 5 minutes or so. But if you want to go around and just kind of give your updates, I think we can start with hiring and discipline. If you want to go, Alicia, kind of give some updates.
Sure. Okay. The Hiring and Discipline Subcommittee met on July 8th. We had one member who is still traveling in France all this month, and so she was away. And another member who had a medical emergency. So there were just 2 members present, but we were in agreement and we got quite a bit done. We reviewed the public hearing on drug arrests. We reviewed the letter that we were submitting to the Montgomery County Executive and the Council regarding our second request for specific data to be provided by MCPD to the PAC. We reviewed the legislative bills that were forwarded to our subcommittee, specifically Bill 1721, Bill 1821, and Bill 1921. And regarding the public hearing, it was agreed that PAC needs to make a concerted effort and plan really to announce the public hearings, because members were disappointed at such a small turnout, and that those who were most impacted by drug arrests were not in attendance. We were cognizant of interested persons' apprehension in attending and freely expressing their complaints and concerns regarding the police without fear of reprisal. It was suggested that attendees be permitted to register anonymously and remain off camera during their testimony. Regarding our letter to the Montgomery County Executive, it was agreed that a letter to the MCPD needed to be drafted, copied to the Montgomery County Council, and follow up to the public hearing on drug arrest. And there is a member who is in the process of drafting that letter. Regarding our bills, I can certainly share more about that later if you want to know where we came out on it. But there were no new edits or comments other than the ones that we had already submitted to PAC a couple weeks ago. And that's it. Eric, did I miss anything?
Perfect. Thank you, Alicia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alicia. And I wasn't able to join them at the last meeting, but thank you so much. If you want, let's pass it on to the Policing and School Subcommittee.
Yep. So Jasmine's internet is a little wonky where she is. So I will speak for her, and she's been jumping in and out. So we met with the Student Wellbeing Action Group. So as you guys know, part of County Executive Elrick's work around public safety was this essential creation of this student action group that has 8 student members, 4 of which are co-chairs of each subcommittee. And they sent us about a 5-6 page document. They sent it last night, so we will get it to you guys before the end of the week so you guys can see it. But they came out with some really, really good recommendations based around improving mental health services, the establishment of a MCPS specific mobile crisis team, which Jen, I thought about you immediately because that speaks to a lot of the work that you're doing with a lot of the stakeholders. And I thought that it was really interesting because I think sometimes we think that the youth are disconnected from some of the things that we think, but they're thinking along a lot of the same lines. And so that was really interesting to hear from them. We'll share that with you guys, so you guys will have that by the end of the week. And we are meeting with, Jasmine and I are meeting with 2 members of the Restorative Justice Department from MCPS just to talk about, so they're trying to expand their office right now. I don't know if you guys know, but they only have 2 full-time staff members from the Restorative Justice Unit. They're trying to add more, but they're trying to figure out creative ways to do that. And so we're going to hear from them in terms of just what steps they're taking to make sure that they have a full office, more staff members in time for when students return, hopefully fully in September. So those are a couple of things that came out from our meetings over the last month or so.
Thank you so much, Dalvin.
Can I ask what's a full office? Are there staffing goals?
Yeah. So they have enough money from what they told us to have 5 full-time staff members. 5. Right now they only have 2, and they've had 2 for about, I want to say about 1.5 years, 2 years. So they haven't been able to fill the 3 positions that they've been looking to fill, but they are hopeful that they're going to be able to do that in time for September. Yes, Eric.
Dalvin, can you tell us a little bit more about what the restorative justice office at Montgomery County Public Schools might do and how that might relate to the Montgomery County Police?
Yeah, sure. So one of the big conversations, obviously, that we've been a part of is the whole policing in schools, right? And almost a secondary part of that conversation is, what does training for MCPS staff look like in terms of utilizing restorative justice instead of utilizing the police for disciplinary issues, right? And so the restorative justice office would be responsible for training MCPS staff, for creating parameters as to when you call police in MCPS, because, you know, and we've heard this from both MCPS and MCPD. MCPS has a tendency to overutilize MCPD for disciplinary issues. And so, but there's no clear cut rubric for calling police. So the restorative justice unit would design that and help implement that across the board. So those are the 2 main things. And so the hope is that if they are able to design this rubric and implement it, then if MCPD remains in schools, which I don't think is going to happen, but if they do, then there's a clear cut way to show why you're calling them. Right. And what comes after that, right? Not just calling the police, but this is who you're going to interact with, right? Telling the students who they're interacting with on a consistent basis and what action plan would come out of it. So that's what they would do in regards to policing in schools.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
You got it. No problem.
Thank you so much, Dalvin, and thank you so much for the work that you all are doing. Let's pass it on to Emergency Response Subcommittee.
Hello. We have been trying to get together as our group, and we keep missing each other. Everybody's life is just so crazy, but I will give an update. There's a lot happening in Montgomery County. Really great work is being done with the emergency response. All of the social workers that the county funded last year have now been hired. There are 6 new social workers. Their training is starting. I believe they're going to begin CIT next week. I was lucky enough to get to train them about autism and mental health, autism plus diagnoses a couple of weeks ago. Some of them are already going out on calls. There are calls that are happening that are going without police. And they have divided the calls into 3 tiers. There's a tier 1, which would be something like a school situation, a public setting, something where there's no threat of violence or weapons. There's a tier 2, which would be somewhere in between there, where a social worker would show up and then be supported by the police. And tier 3 is where there's definite, violence happening or aggression or weaponry, something is reported and there's a very high intense situation going on. Then they have the police reporting first and clearing the scene, and then social workers are coming to follow up. There's also funding in the next budget for 6 peer support people, which will build out this program on the backside to not just help the people in the moment, but do provide follow-up and help them afterwards and get them almost like a family navigator, peer support people. Those positions will be coming in the next year. And there are 2 hubs that are now being crisis response hubs that are being added and built out. One of them up in Germantown, a building on Middlebrook Road, one of them in Silver Spring. So those will be staffed. If they're not already, they will be staffed 24/7 every day of the year, and they will be much closer to the response. Germantown and Silver Spring are hotbeds right now. So the new locations will be great. I've been working on I just totally blanked out, the restoration center plans and making sure that the no wrong entry, no wrong door will fully meet the needs of all of our people, whether it's drugs or alcohol or autism plus diagnoses or IDD or other mental health things. We really need to make sure that that structure is okay for everybody. And then what else am I missing? Oh, and they're working with the Cahoots training is going to begin next week for various parts of the community. You need to be invited. I gave them your names. We'll just see. There's going to be public offerings coming up in mid-August where anybody can take it. But that's starting already next week for mental health and care workers. And there's work being done with the 911 call center to streamline the 911, 811, 311, 211 all into a proper way so they can better determine exactly who to send and have a more streamlined process. I don't know if they're adding questions or how exactly they're doing that, but that work is being done already, and they're working very closely with Fire and Rescue, who already have a really great social worker plan. You know, they've been doing this for years already. Fire and Rescue has social workers that go out to calls. So I think that's the update from here. I do have to jump off in early tonight. I'm doing a national trauma education board meeting, and then that's what I have for now. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen, and all the work that
Just
y'all.
like to thank Jen for an excellent report. She's doing a great job.
Thank you so much. And so let's pass it on to our discretionary policing subcommittee.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything to report except that we've agreed to start looking at pedestrian stops. That's about it. We've looked at traffic stops, and I think we still have some clarity lacking in how in the responses we received. And so frankly, I think we have to spend a little more time digging into that. But after that, we've agreed to look at pedestrian stops. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Thank you so much, Ms. Branson. Now pass it back to Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. All right. Thank you guys for that. And thank you guys for all the hard work that you're doing. I know that summers are usually tougher to get folks that you want to speak to and stuff like that with folks taking vacation. So I commend you guys for the work that you've been doing. So you all should have gotten from Susan the preliminary results from the audit that was done. So I wanted us to review it, just the recommendations, because what Nadia and I wanted to get your take on is we've done a lot of work over the last year in terms of we've seen some data, right? Some data has been a little flawed, but we've seen some data, right? We've heard from some community members, though it stands to reason we can do a better job of getting more community members, those that are rightfully and erroneously affected by a lot of the stuff that we're tackling, right? But I feel like this audit captured a lot of the big picture stuff that I think we kind of landed on, right? And they landed on some recommendations that I think it falls under us. Welcome, Mr. Andrews. I think it falls under us just how the implementation of these recommendations should look like, right? Because I think we have some pretty good ideas and we'll have more ideas as we get more feedback from the community as to what it should look like. So I want to start by looking at and Carlos, do you mind sharing the recommendations just so everybody can see it on their screen, and then we can go through one by one just to see what folks think of the recommendations and where, because what Nadia and I were thinking was that we break down the recommendations into the subcommittees and then folks can kind of work on those recommendations themselves, but we're open to ideas as to how you folks think the best way to tackle this is. Does that make sense? Yeah. No. Carlos, there we go. Okay. So the first recommendation, and Carlos will scroll down so you guys can see it, but the first recommendation from the preliminary audit report included determining a single repository for use of force and internal affairs incidents and investigate all use of force incidents. Now, that's something that the discipline subcommittee talked a lot about, right? About how can we make sure that all incidents are investigated thoroughly, right? And that folks can have trust in the process. And two, it needs to be easier to find the results of these investigations, right? One of the frustrating parts that I think the subcommittee had mentioned was that there did not seem to be a single place to look for some of this information. And so I think that that's one that ties into a lot of the work that you guys are already doing, because if I remember correctly, that was one of the recommendations that you guys had. And I think that that's something that could come from that. The other part that they had was to expand the role of internal affairs to include investigating criminal misconduct of officers instead of assigning this to investigators in investigative services in the Investigative Services Bureau. And Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong, this is something that you had mentioned a few months ago in a couple of the articles that you shared, where it appeared from what the information from the data that we got was that this wasn't happening, right? That because of the ISB, they were handling a lot of the criminal misconduct investigations. Sergeant Brewer, Chief Patel, can you speak to that a little bit? Because I want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly.
Sure. Whoops, hold on, turn the video on now here.
No worries.
So a couple of things. So first, I want to just steal the quick opportunity here to introduce my new colleague, Carmen Faciolo, the new Assistant Chief in charge of our Community Resources Bureau. So I'll let him speak for himself later on, but awesome. A new addition to our team and I think a great addition to help really drive our community and our department forward. So yes, historically, when a criminal allegation is made against a police officer, and that could be, anything from an allegation of a theft or a domestic violence, those investigations are assigned to a detective sergeant in my bureau, in the Investigative Services Bureau, because criminal investigations have a whole separate set of rules that apply to them than internal policy investigations, which is what our Internal Affairs Division handles. And I think part of the logic behind that is that our criminal investigative sergeants specialize in what they do. In particular, if you think about domestic violence as an example, that's the world they live in every day. They know the laws, they know the procedures, and they're dealing with the same criminal, procedural requirements that you would have when investigating anybody for a crime. And again, those rules are very different from policy administrative rules, and the expertise, the access to certain databases of information. Again, when they're for a criminal investigation, there's different things that can occur there. So that has been our policy, and I think like everything in the audit, both preliminarily and in the long run, we're going to look at all of it and go, hey, what makes sense, right? Working through everything, what makes sense in our for Montgomery County Police and the community to apply. And so I think, from my 2 cents of the world, I think it makes sense for criminal investigators to do criminal investigative work. Because it is different from doing internal policy work, but we'll see how all that goes in the future.
Okay, so that's helpful for me. And welcome, Carmen. Nice of you to join us. Does anybody have any questions for Chief Patel before we go to the next recommendations? No. Carlos, let's go to the next wave. Okay, so the next recommendation that came in. So these are all parts of disciplining and discipline, which I think that's why we should send those to the discipline subcommittee. I think it would make sense to lump all those together. Does the process for you guys, does it make sense to break down these recommendations into their specific subcommittee and then send them to you guys? Does that seem like the best way to tackle these recommendations? I'm open it up to anybody who has different suggestions, but Nadia and I thought that made the most sense to make the work a little bit more efficient, but I'm open to other suggestions.
I think that would be very helpful.
Yep. Okay.
This is Rob, and yes, I agree. We need to have a process to circulate comments and subcommittee views so that when we come to look at this in the in the full pack, we're fully prepared.
Okay. I think that makes perfect sense. Anybody else?
I thought that, I'm just to respond to what Robin just stated. I thought that we did have that in place, that the subcommittees were receiving comments and input from other members of the PAC. That was was suggested and that was encouraged. And my only concern is that if we do a lot of offline
Mhm.
back and forth, we run dangerously close to violating the
The Open
Open
Meetings Act.
Meetings Act.
Right.
So while we have not received comments or input from other members of the PAC, I welcome that.
Yeah, just to clarify that, maybe Carlos or Susan can clarify that. My understanding is, provided that the subcommittee, the number of people on the subcommittee plus the people commenting do not constitute a majority of the PAC, we are okay.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. The only way that it could get a little close to violating the Open Meetings Act would be if like 6 or 7 people were on a email thread and everyone was constantly responding. That would be like a conversation between more than a quorum. But yeah, if you keep it less than quorum, and if you're just taking one-off comments from PAC members, I don't think it would be an issue.
Okay. So that's actually really good to know. So does that make sense to everybody? So the as long as you're not 6 or 7 of us are commenting and just multiple replies to each other, right? I think we're okay. Am I understanding that right, Carlos? But if it's one off comment, it's not, we're good with that.
Yeah.
Or one member of the subcommittee could be could step forward and collect all of the comments from the members of that particular subcommittee to give to that other subcommittee.
Yeah.
Then that one person, giving information. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think honestly, and I think that would make a lot of sense, because one, it would limit how many people are sending emails back and forth, right? So we don't run a risk of violating the Open Meetings Act. But 2, it also allows the materials that are being shared to be just be shared in a more efficient manner, right? Because then once, say, for example, Alicia, I'll use you as an example. Say you send something to Jasmine in the policing subcommittee, right? And the policing and school subcommittee. And then one of you sends it to Carlos, and then Carlos sends it to everybody on a Friday. That's easier than like Carlos having to retrieve 6 or 7 different emails, or from 4 or 5 different people. I think it's just easier that way if it's 1 or 2 people doing the bulk of putting the stuff together. Does that make sense to you, Carlos?
Yeah, and I just wanted to chime in, like, even though the subcommittee will be compiling all this information, the subcommittee is going to report out to the full PAC anyway, right? So the Open Meetings Act basically just wants to give the public an opportunity to hear a public body consider things. So, as long as we're kind of holding to that standard, then I think we should be okay. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Okay. So does anybody else have any questions about the specific process, or does that make sense to folks? Yep. Okay. So the next, go ahead, Carlos.
I see Eric with his hand up.
Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. Do we have any information about how the MCPD has received these recommendations, and the sense of sort of timing for those that they will accept or review to decide to accept and then implement? I mean, there are a lot of provisions, and I'm curious, how the police are in the process of evaluating and preparing to respond.
That's a really good question.
I'm happy to answer that question. Chief Patil, please chime in. So I came on board 2 weeks ago, and part of my role in the Community Resources Bureau is to oversee, in collaboration with the other assistant chiefs, the Policy and Planning Division, which is ultimately responsible for implementing the recommendations coming from the audit. We are sifting through these. We got these recommendations literally my first day on the job. Individuals have been on vacation last week and this week. So our plan is to sit down in the coming weeks, review the recommendations, and start to create a strategic plan and a roadmap or blueprint per se of what we can implement now, the next 6 months, the next year, and in the long term. And we'll continue to keep you updated as we do that. I think there are going to be some very quick recommendations that can be very quickly implemented because they're low hanging fruit. I hate that term, but it's the easiest way to phrase it. And then there are larger things like redeveloping units, buying new technology, implementing new policies and procedures that have to go through a long list of bureaucratic processes to get us to that point. So we'll keep you updated as this unfolds and let you know as soon as I know, as soon as Chief Patil knows where we are.
Thank you.
Also, I had the opportunity to be at the presentation of those of the recommendations, and the chief and the county executive seem to receive them very well, and so I see that the organization that did the audit will be continuing to work closely with them as they develop the programs, it appears. So,
and thank you for that, Mr. Ricks, 'cause that's a really good question. Sergeant Brewer, would you be able to chime in on what the FOP's opinion on these recommendations are? And because I know, and Assistant Chief Carmen mentioned that some things are going to be, and I too hate the term low hanging fruit, but it's applicable, right? But there's also some things that are privy to collective bargaining, right? And things that you kind of have to go through the collective bargaining process. So I was curious what FOP's opinion on some of these recommendations were.
So if you're talking about the ones simply on the screen, some of the ones I can address right now, the internal auditing protocol for body worn cameras, we think that should be, there's currently something in our policy, but we want it more stricter adhered to. And that was one of the things that was also in President Hucker's bill that I put in the email that we support. As far as officers working off duty should be required to wear body worn cameras. I know there's officers in my unit that because we're not in patrol unit right now, our body worn cameras were taken for us. Some of them specifically requested to keep them because they work in an off-duty capacity and it was denied for budgetary reasons. That's something I also think people should consider. The majority of the officers want them and want to wear them. And it's something that the union also supports. So from my point of view, and to kind of echo what the chief is saying, some of these are, again, from our view, budgetary issues are budgetary issues, but there's something that I don't think we're far off. I mean, we want what's best for the officers, and the body worn cameras is something that we do want and I think could be easily addressed. There's a couple of things in here. Identifying what a serious use of force is. One thing they did was outline a couple of levels of force. I think that's an important thing to do, especially when you're looking at stats, because we don't have that right now. You're looking at a stat and a number that could be as simple as me having to pull somebody closer to me, and that's documented as the same level of force as somebody that has to deploy a taser or even more. And I think the levels, is something that would just help with information and sharing information properly and transparency. And as we get further on, if there's more questions, please reach out and I can certainly address those.
Great. Thank you for that, Sergeant Brewer. Does anybody have any questions for Sergeant Brewer regarding what she just said before we go to the mental health response part? Shabab has a question. I see your hand.
Thank you so much, Sergeant Brewer. That was really helpful. On a slightly related note, I know that there was some reporting in the news about a lawsuit between the FOP and the county around the use of force specifically. And since some of the recommendations here do concern use of force, I just wanted to take this opportunity to get your thoughts on this. I can understand that there's certain issues that will be subject to collective bargaining, but I was just wondering if you could shed some light on what specific concerns that the union has around the existing use of force policy that the county is trying to put through.
I'll speak about it just briefly because there is a lawsuit, but I just asked everybody to understand that it isn't necessarily the content of it. It's the attempt to circumvent collective bargaining, and also the effort that was made to block us from conversation. We have been very open and said we're willing to have a conversation and open and discuss it, and we were actually blocked out of some of those meetings with the county council, and that's. As a police officer, I think there should be at least input, hearing. There should be an exchange of information. We can agree to disagree. I know Dalvin says that quite a lot, and I agree with that. We can agree to disagree, but there needs to be open dialogue in order for us to effectively move forward. So it wasn't necessarily specifically the content. It was the circumventing of collective bargaining. Again, there's a lot I can't comment on. Again, it is a pending lawsuit, but I just ask you guys to understand that it's not necessarily content. There was a lot of content in there that already existed. And I believe that was pointed out that a lot of that content and that use of force had been our policy for quite some time. So it wasn't necessarily content.
Anybody else with any other questions for Sergeant Brewer before we move to the mental health response recommendations?
Yeah, I do. It's for Sergeant Brewer and excuse me, the Assistant Chief.
Yep.
Sorry. I'm wondering if it's possible as you all have reviewed these recommendations, whether you could delineate the ones that you believe are subject to collective bargaining. I think that would help provide clarity for all of us.
Hi, so this is Carmen again. I am not our legal counsel, nor am I the expert in the 2 weeks that I've been here on collective bargaining. So, and Chief Patil, please chime in, because you have much more experience, especially as you used to head up MSB. I think what will happen here is there's going to be, as we look at what we can do, short-term, long-term, years out, what we want to create will then be subject to legal review, and we will have conversations about whether these recommendations as we implement are subject to collective bargaining. But overall, I don't think I can check down each recommendation and say it is or it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I bring it up is because, you know, if it's subject to collective bargaining, then, you know, our focus on it, you know, becomes an inefficient exercise, right? And so, and everybody here is, you know, is a volunteer. And so, you know, you know, for lack of a better phrase, I wouldn't want us spinning our wheels on something that, that is really outside of the realm for us to consider. And so, you know, I understand that you all have to go through, you know, this systemic process of review. Do you have a time frame for that? Carmen?
Absolutely, Ms. Brenson. So realistically, I think in the next few months, we'll be doing that, especially before the fall, and absolutely by the end of the year. Again, I've been here for 2 weeks, and as you know, we've had some crises over the last few days or so. So I'm going to really start to turn my head to this tomorrow. Actually, I'm meeting with our planning and analysis or planning and policy team at some point tomorrow afternoon. So hopefully we will have some more info.
Sherry, can I ask Sherry a question?
Yeah.
I don't quite understand why you think that issues that are subject to collective bargaining are outside our area. It seems to me that we can still say whatever it is. I mean, our purpose is to be, in a certain sense, a voice for the community, and the community may have very strong views on particular issues that are subject to the collective bargaining. Well, fine. Then the chief executive will know that they need to bargain effectively about that.
How do I put this? As we are moving through this, I'm interested in assuring that we change the things we can and not get hung up on trying to hit roadblocks. So while, you know, and that's why I asked if they can delineate those things that are subject to collective bargaining and those things that are not, because, you know, then we would be able to figure out where our greatest efficiency would lie.
Okay, well, I guess we can sort of come back to it if and when we need to on a particular issue.
Yeah, and if I may, I think what we'll do is we will, and I'll go to you, Sergeant Brewer, in just a second. But what we'll do is, because I think the first step is breaking down these recommendations into what specific subcommittee should get them, and then send them to you guys, so you guys aren't, looking at things that aren't within your purview. And then I think then we can get clarification on which ones fall, and that way then the subcommittees can get clarification as to which ones fall under collective bargaining. Because I do understand Ms. Branson's point in the sense that if it's something that, and Rob and Dr. Gash, I do understand your point in terms of like it all falls under our jurisdiction, but if it's something that we're not going to be able to impact, and I'm going to use that word, that may not be the right word, but if it's something we're not going to be able to impact, then I'd rather us focus on the things we can, and as they sort out the other pieces, right? Because we don't want to offer recommendations as to how they should do things for things that they're not going to tackle right now because of collective bargaining. Does that make sense? I'm going to take that as a
Yeah,
sure, that's fine.
I mean, that was kind of my point. That we should change the things we can.
Yeah.
Have the wisdom to know the difference.
Have the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Right. Sergeant Brewer, your hand's up. I'm sorry. You're up. Okay, we'll come back to Kate once she unmutes. But yeah, so we'll do that. What Nadia, Carlos, Susan, and I will do is we'll break these down into subcommittee topics. Sergeant Brewer, I see you're off mute. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Now I'm
No
sorry,
worries.
technical difficulties. Okay, just for clarification, the things that are subject to collective bargaining are wages, benefits, and working conditions. Health and safety is something that falls under the county code that also must be considered, but that falls under the county code for all employees. We also have an LMRC, which is Labor Management Relations Committee, and we have that meeting once a month, and that's to kind of try to work out things collectively as labor and management so that we can come together. If there's issues that need to be discussed that can be worked out in that form, that we can go ahead and do that. So to go to Ms. Branson's, I feel like there's a lot of, well, if it has to go through the union, then we can't talk about it. And I don't think that's fair for the union, because there are things we're willing to meet and that we want as well. And I think, like I said, with the body worn cameras, for example, there's some assumption that because those had to be negotiated, we didn't want them. We wanted them. Both sides wanted them. The police management and the union wanted body worn cameras. So please don't say, well, it has to be negotiated, so let's not even discuss it. And I understand what you're saying, Ms. Branson. Let's affect the things that we can do now. And I understand that there are things that, yes, have to be bargained, but don't put them off, especially since I'm here as a representative from the union, that it's not something that we wouldn't entertain simply because it has to be bargained. We do have those LMRC meetings, and some things can get worked out there, but at least if we can work together, which I think is the effort of everybody, if we can work together, we can come to solutions quicker, hopefully. Again, I joke all the time, it's government, so things don't move super swift, but the goal is to work together to come to that understanding and to kind of reach things together with everybody's input. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that was pretty clarifying for me. Mr. Ricks, I see you're off mute. Do you have something to add?
Well, just the fact that there was a union representative who was at the presentation and spoke on the union. So it appears that they interviewed the union and that the union is on board with what's happening here and will have input.
Yeah, and thank you, Sergeant Brewer, for what you said. Jen, yes, I know you only have 10 minutes, and I'm very cognizant of that. So let's go right into mental health. Carlos, if you can scroll down to the mental health response so I can read off some of the summary findings. So the recommendation started with, they want to restructure the mental health advisory committee to provide sufficient on-the-ground expertise, as well as senior rank and executive leadership to provide practical and informed guidance. And they want to establish both a county and state steering committee, with the county steering committee made up of the crisis center, criminal justice court, MCPD, EMS, which, and Jen, you can speak to this a little bit more, it very much mirrors what I think is already happening with a lot of the Dr. Santiago's of the world. I think it's a lot of that, which to me, that makes me hopeful, because it's not reinventing the wheel, right? It's not trying to come up with something from scratch. It's taking what they're already doing fairly good work in the county and trying to expand it so that way they can make sure that the right people are responding to the 311s and the 211s and the 911s. But also that once we have that information, we can then impact some of these policy changes that we want to see, right? So one of the things that the county does a really good job of is they've been doing a really good job of it for the last couple of years, is that their adolescent mental health clinic does really good work with teens who are in crisis. They do really, really good work, right? And that's something that I know when I sat in on the presentation for this, that's something that they talked about expanding, right? Was by hiring more clinicians so that way they could, man the 24-hour hotline in a more efficient way. Jen, I want to go to you because this is your area and this is a big chunk that this is going to get assigned to your subcommittee. But I wanted just your quick thoughts on what of these things are hopeful to you? What are these things you think we can really push to be a little bit better? And yes, Ms. Rhodes, we will make sure that the document is available on the PAC website.
Well, like as I kind of alluded to before, thank you, Delvin, that most of this is already happening. We just spoke at the last meeting last week to start pulling in some more jail representation, because that part is a little piece that's kind of missing from our ongoing weekly conversations that are going on for restoration. The CIT training, that's all happening, and it's more inclusive, and there's going to be the super CIT folks that choose to do the extra 40 hours, so there'll be many more people that have more training on the road. The telecommunications, as you said, they're trying to streamline all of that. I'm just kind of reading through these real quickly. The mobile crisis outreach team, they're actually adding, there's a possibility of 2 to 4 beds at the crisis center on Picard, which is new beds. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for the restoration center to open, which would be, the no wrong door kind of thing, there will be places for people to go, because I know a huge piece of this is that law enforcement doesn't really know where to take people, that we're out of places, and the ERs are bulging at the seams. The other thing I did want to add here too, and I think it was in the community partner part, our meeting is coming up on July 28th, the collaborative mental health group that I put together, and we are having a presentation from the Shepherd Pratt Hospital, where they have begun a collaborative effort with Montgomery County Hospitals to open 15 more beds in Montgomery County, already standing beds in various hospitals. I think that's 15. That's why they're meeting with us on the 29th. Everybody's welcome to that meeting as well. Just let me know. But there's, and reaching out to the community. I mean, I'm an example of the community partnership. I run a nonprofit, but I happen to have expertise in one area. So the county and the police and all of, the emergency response is super open to all these different, input, every mind is involved, and Bethesda Cares for the homeless population. All of us are involved. And I think that's the really great collaborative piece of the county, where I'm very proud of all the work that's being done in the mental health area right now with Dr. Santiago leading. He's doing an excellent job, and he's pulling in the people that are needed. So I can't get into the nitty gritty about the CIT report being completed. That part, that's out of my thing. Kate probably, or Chief Patil may have more on that, because I don't know the nuts and bolts of that. I just know that, crisis response is really growing and expanding, and lots of people working very, very hard. So.
And I will also add to that before I open it up to everybody, that one of the really good things that I think is coming out of it is that folks are all being trained using the same language and using the same standards, which I think is very, very different than how it's been done in years past, right? As most social workers can attest, we'll have 7 different definitions for depression and 7 different, right?
We were just talking about this, like, what is mental health? Does that fall under autism plus diagnoses? Like, do they fall into mental health? What is behavioral health? Where do they all overlap? And that's actually being discussed on the state level with, Lieutenant Governor's Commission for Mental and Behavioral Health. That's coming up there, and they're working hard on expanding beds across the state, as well as getting more, 211, the new governor's plan about suicide. It's incredible stuff is being done. So
yeah,
it's good.
So go ahead. Yep.
Master Chair. I don't know if anybody on the call can actually answer this question, but I would like to know, we've just had a recent death in Gaithersburg that I certainly would like to follow and know more information on, just as we received information regarding the body cam footage of Robert White's death. But in general, I would like to know, are the deaths, the police involved killings, Fernand Berhe, Robert White, Kwame Okran, and this young man just recently this past weekend, are they mental health sufferers? Does anyone know that? Did they present with some kind of mental health issues? I'm just would love to know that. And I'd also certainly love to know more information as the investigation moves forward.
Bill has probably some insight there. I have not heard. Yeah.
So let's go to Chief Patel and then we'll go to Shabab, who has her hand up. Okay, go ahead, Chief Patel. Sorry.
Sure. So that was a really broad question, right? Because as in reference to those other cases that you mentioned preceding, this last weekend, I think there are certainly in some of those cases, signs of mental health, potential mental health issues. We don't always get to that final fact, right? Like in some cases, I'm not going to use names, it's just because these are unverified, kind of pieces of information. But you may have a family that says, hey, as far as we know, nothing was going on. As far as we know, the person was fine and there was no depression, there was no issue. And yet you see the signs of what may appear to be in certain cases like suicide by cop. And you can make an assumption like, well, something must have been going on, but you don't always get to the bottom of it, right? Because the intent without other factors involved or other evidence involved, you may not really get to the truth of what happened. Because some cases maybe only one person knows, and that's the person the incident happens with. I can give an overview of this last weekend's incident to the degree that I'm able to. The chief had a press conference this afternoon. If you want to hear that, I think it's way too early in this particular case. It is an active investigation, and it's just way too early at this point to definitively say there's a mental health issue. In many cases, excuse me, that we run across also, you may have a mental health issue, but you also may have, drugs or alcohol or something else involved. And I think sometimes it's hard to say, which one of those, kind of got in front of the other. And so it's hard to answer the question in general across the board on all. I think you mentioned about 4 different cases. But I will tell you,
all deaths. Yeah, just the deaths.
Yes.
The police involved killings have all been, yeah. So I guess my hope is that while this is wonderful and certainly needed, that something impacts training such that perhaps we don't have, because from what I see, they seem like unnecessary killings. But that's just, I didn't want to get argumentative, so I'm just going to finish. I'm done.
No, yeah, I hear you, and I think that it's we look at every one of these incidents. Sergeant Brewer is one of our trainers at the academy, one of our lead, people over there. We look at every one of these incidents across the board and go, okay, what factors are in play? What did we know? What didn't we know? What did we do? What could have we done different? We want to get better every single day. So we definitely take it very seriously to get all the facts that we can to help then drive our training for the future. Because every one of any interaction with somebody, certainly if it goes the way these cases we're talking about, you have to learn from them, right? You have to take stock, and because there's such a deep dive into the investigative process as there should be, you learn a lot that you can then convey into training later.
Thank you for that, Chief Patel. I have a question. Shabab, you had your hand up, and then, but there's one question from Ms. Branson in the chat. Has the body cam footage of this weekend's incident been released? Do you guys know?
No, it has not been released yet. It is the chief's intention to release it at the appropriate time. That appropriate time is making sure that we don't damage the investigative process. The example for that would be if you put video out too quickly and you don't have everybody's statements that you need to have, already in place, then producing the video as an example could affect, the clarity of that statement, right? You want to get a statement from somebody independent of the video, because their perceptions may be different from what a camera picks up, because the camera doesn't see what the human eye sees. It doesn't smell, it doesn't, hear and process information the same way. So the chief is absolutely committed to transparency as the county executive, but we're trying to do it in a manner and timing that does not adversely affect the investigation.
Okay, Shabab, you had your hand up. Before I go to Shabab, so what we're going to do is Carlos, Nadia, Susan, and I are going to take the preliminary results, break them down into subcommittee topics. You guys will get them before the end of the week, so you guys can start sifting through these on your own. We want to stay on the agenda. We only have 2 minutes left in this. I want to go to Shabab's question. Shabab, go ahead.
Sure thing. I really appreciate, Alicia, you bringing that up, because I think it's important for us to keep sight of the very human impact of some of these decisions we're making, and be aware that a lot of folks in our community are looking to us. So I really appreciate that reminder. Looking at the mental health response section, there were a couple of comments that really stood out to me. Talking about how the policies regarding mental health and behavioral health crises are outdated and insufficient to address the need. The fact that county resources devoted to mental health crisis response are, quote, inadequate and poorly coordinated. Now, I do want to agree with how Delvin started off the section, and that I am hopeful. I think a lot of great work has happened. I think Jen has done an amazing job in putting a lot of volunteer hours behind that and making sure that that happens. But I am also wanting to sort of take a step back and think, how is it that we can use the urgency of this language to perhaps get attention from whether it's the county or asking the county to reach out to the state, because this is one area that is really difficult to fund. There's certain projects, like you can say, let's build a building, and then that's a concrete thing that people can get behind, or let's put in a unit. But there's a lot of stuff that falls under mental health that isn't concrete or tangible, or you can cut a ribbon for. So how can we use this opportunity to really get that stuff funded? And how can we as a body recommend that those things get funded? So I just want us to keep that framing in mind, and perhaps we can use that same framing for other issues as well.
Thank you for this, Bob, and I think that's a really good point. So like I said, Nadia, Carlos, Susan, and I will break these down, and you guys will get them. Each subcommittee will get a section that they can start to kind of work through, okay? Jen, thank you. I know you got to run. Let's go to the next topic, which is PAC outreach. So hearing a lot of what you guys said in terms of making sure that we get more turnout at the big public forum that we're going to do. So I wanted to open it up to see what ideas folks had. I know that the pandemic and a lot of people being zoomed out, I think that's something that's very real. I also think that I love the suggestion of having folks know that they can submit stuff anonymously. They can have their camera off, because I did hear from some folks after the public hearing that we had, that was a concern for some folks who said they were going to testify. They were going to testify for it, and then they ended up getting cold feet. So I like those suggestions, but I'm curious as to what you guys think in terms of just ideas that can help us get the word out for this next one that we're going to have in September. And I will open that up to the floor. I know for me, I think utilizing social media is always good if we want to make sure we get youth involvement, because they're always on social media. You can find them anywhere, right? And a lot of these incidents that have been happening have impacted, folks that are on the younger side, right? Like, we mentioned the shooting that happened this weekend. It was a 21-year-old, right? So again, like, being able to reach our young folks and making sure that they have a seat at the table is important. But I also know I'm also cognizant of the fact that at the public hearing, we did have folks who had been in this county for 20, 30 years who had really bad experiences, right? And those aren't necessarily the people who generally use social media, but those are the people who were hesitant to come forward, right? Because they felt maybe some retaliation would come to them, et cetera, et cetera. So I will open up the floor to you guys, because Nadia and I are trying to figure out what the best way to ensure a better turnout for the next public hearing and for subsequent public hearings, because our hope is that if we get a good enough turnout this first one, then the next one we get even more turnout, and the next one even more turnout, because folks will know that we've created that space for them. So I will open it up to the floor and see what you guys are thinking in terms of just what more outreach we can do in preparation for this next public hearing.
How about WTO? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
How about a PSA on WTOP? How about, just as you and Shabab had an excellent on-air appearance on a TV station, just a few minutes doing that again, or, I know we're not doing Twitter, but somebody putting it out on Twitter that there will be a hearing, not necessarily stating anybody's positions regarding any of it, but,
Can I, Alicia, those are good ideas. Can I make a distinction between general outreach or even, somewhat demographically targeted outreach to the broader population and specific outreach to specific groups? I think it's really important that the sort of NGO community, the nonprofit community in particular, in the county, send representatives to these meetings. We need to hear from them, and they need to hear from us. I mean, they are a really important conduit to their own membership, and I think we need to have. We somehow need to develop a pretty systematic list of the organizations that we want to touch initially. And that's not to say other organizations shouldn't be touched, but if the ACLU doesn't send someone to our meetings, then I think we fail. I mean, we need to have, and the NAACP, and there are at least a dozen organizations who have memberships, and we need to be working with them. That's one area, and a second area is the churches and the synagogues and the mosques. I mean, again, these are important nodes in the community, and I wonder how we can reach out specifically to them.
So I love both of those ideas, and I love the ideas that you had, Alicia. What Shabab and I did last year was we started crafting a list of media folks, right? Because I think that taps into Alicia's point, and I like your point, Robin, about leaning on a lot of these nonprofits that are here, right? That are doing a lot of this equity work, right? So I think Nadia and I reaching out to those organizations, I think will be key to make that first linkage. However, I will say if anybody else on the PAC has already pre-existing relationships with those organizations, then feel free, like if you can, just shoot Nadia and I an email, let us know that you do have that relationship and that you're going to send an introductory email CCing us, because I think that'll help with the familiarity part of it, right? Because again, nonprofits tend to generally not trust everybody, right? So, but if you have somebody that knows them, I think it's easier for folks to trust you, right? Because I think if we need as many hands on this as we can, right? If we're able to tap into those relationships, and I think that opens us up to be in play in a lot of places that maybe we wouldn't necessarily be, because folks see police and automatically think certain things, right? That's just kind of the reality, especially with the communities that we're working with. So I love those ideas. So I will reiterate, if folks have pre-existing relationships with like the NAACP, ACLU, a bunch of the big nonprofits, please feel free to reach out to us. I know Heidi. Oh, okay. So Heidi, that's actually a really good point, I think, and that's something that I did hear after the public hearing, is that folks thought that we were asking one specific thing for that public hearing, and Shabab and I heard this even when we spoke with the reporter from Channel 9, that folks thought we were looking for information from only one specific kind of stop or one specific kind of incident, and I think that also we need to do a better job of just making sure we clarify that for folks, so folks know what it is that we're looking for, because we did get a couple of community members who spoke about different situations because they were a little bit confused. So we want to make sure we clarify that. But thank you for that, Heidi. So we'll make sure that we do that. We'll make sure that we connect with those organizations long before the next public hearing. So that way, if there's things that they need, right? And the hope is that the next one we do in person, right? So if there's things that they need, like accessibility, like, whatever the case may be, like we can buy food for I will buy food for the organization that brings the most people to the next one or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But there's ways to bring people to the table that haven't normally been to the table. Ms. Hudson.
Master Chair, I just wanted to say very quickly, if a member of the county council could join any of our sessions in preparation for or leading, that would be very helpful.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree. I agree with that.
I was actually going to suggest something a bit more direct here. I mean, the each of the county councilors have their own list and their own network, and some of them have been doing this for a long time, and they're very deeply embedded. I think, given that we are their creation, that it's entirely appropriate to go to them and ask them for help in activating their networks for public hearing.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's a great idea. So actually, so what Nadia and I will do is, and Carlos and Susan, we'll touch base with you guys tomorrow, is we'll send a letter to you guys, to the county council members, just asking them for that information, right? Because I think that'll give us a good base. And then we can turn to ourselves and say, okay, who in our own network should be at these things, right? Because I think that's a really good point, Robin. I think that a lot of the county council members have, they're 2 terms in. They've been doing this work for even before they became county council members, right? Either as state legislators or what have you. So it's tapping into who they know. So that way we can make sure that we get as much community feedback as we can. My hope also is that as we, as things loosen and we're able to get out into the community, that will help Nadia and I by actually physically going to events, right? Like, so for example, I went to one at Wheaton Mall like a couple weeks ago, but again, there was only like 30 people there because people are still being very cautious. My hope is that in the fall, folks are maybe not being as cautious, or things are safer enough to they're not being too cautious. So that's my hope. But I love those suggestions. Go ahead, Robin.
Can I just clarify one thing? I think inviting county councilors to come is one thing, and it's a good thing. I'm all in favor of that. But I would suggest that we really ask them to put their shoulder behind these meetings so that their constituents know that they are that this is a place for them to come and make their point. Asking them not just to announce that they're going to be there, which of course they will do anyway, but that this is an opportunity for everyone to speak.
Yes, I like that. I think that's a really good point. Does anybody else?
If nothing else, I think all the county council members probably send out periodic newsletters, some every week. And we could, ask for a little blurb announcing in those newsletters. The other place we could potentially get blurbs would be in the county regional centers. They send out newsletters also. I mean, I think before we relied on the press office, and that's okay, but I think we have to be more intentional in that we can't just announce that we're having something, that we have to specifically invite people, from the groups. I mean, you don't have to worry about the NAACP because Vernon and I are both on the executive committee. Y'all covered with us. So, we can invite the ACLU. We can invite. I mean, it's one thing to say y'all come. It's another thing to say, we are specifically asking you to attend and to ask your membership to attend. I think I'm not sure we've proceeded in that way, and that might be helpful.
Yeah, and that's incredibly helpful. And while I know that you guys got us for the NAACP, Ms. Branton, we don't necessarily have that in with a bunch of other organizations. So I think you're right, being deliberate in terms of asking folks, not just, okay, show up on this Tuesday, right? It's, listen, we would really like it if you had that intentionality with this.
Can I
go ahead, Robin?
Yep. One last thought. When you're dealing with the newsletters from the county councilors, or indeed the press office, or any other really kind of outreach, I think it's really important that we provide them with the specific text that we want them to send out, rather than asking them to send out a message. We need to control that so that it comes out right. And so that's just a last thought.
Yeah, and I think that ties in really well to Ms. Branson's point about like they do have these blurbs, right? So we would, they would grant us the permission to write the blurb, so that way it's our language, it's what we're specifically asking for, not just some generic template that they got off Google, right? Okay, so all of these were great suggestions. And I think it's going to be really, really helpful. And I appreciate the dialogue. We have about 18 minutes to go, and I'm going to try, as my first meeting as chair, to have us end a little early before we wrap. Any new business, I will share that. And I'm really glad, Chief Patel, thank you for answering the question about the body camera, because Nadia and I wanted to bring up this body writing a statement requesting that the body camera footage be released. Now, it has only been 72 hours since the incident. The investigation is only a day, right? 2 days long so far. So I understand, and I did watch the press conference earlier. The Ryan LaRose family has seen the body camera footage. So Chief Jones has shared it with them. But I think that would fall under we can do that. But we wanted to take it up to the entire pack to see how you guys felt about that, and then take it to a vote before we just did this all willy-nilly, because we don't operate like that. So I will open it up to the floor to see what you all think of that. That is the new business that Nadia and I wanted to bring up, and before we open it to the floor. So what do you guys think of that?
All right. I just want to make sure I understand the proposition that we request that the police department release the body cam footage to this body, or are we requesting that they release it publicly?
So that I will open up to you guys, right? Because our thought was releasing it to us, to the pack, right?
They would review in an executive session of some sort.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. That was what Nadia and I were thinking, because one, I think while yes, we are not qualified to examine body camera footage, I think that it would be helpful for us to see it, right? Even again, and it's not because one, and Chief Patel, you had mentioned this, it has not been released yet, right? Only Mr. LaRose's family has seen it so far, and obviously the officers. But as the Police Advisory Commission, I think it makes sense for us to see it too. I personally think it makes sense, but I'm opening it up to you guys. But yes, Ms. Branson, it would be for us to see it. We would be asking for the body camera footage to be released to us.
Just as I found it very helpful to watch Robert White's killing on the body camera footage, I would also like to see the footage of this.
Yep.
As well as Kwame Okran, they were plainclothes officers. So I don't know how what the ramifications are for that, but
Yep. Eric, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I saw Nadia's hand and Kate's hand before mine.
Sorry, I didn't see that. Nadia, I'll go to you, and then Sergeant Brewer, and then I'll come back to Eric. Sorry about that. Thank you, Eric.
So I also wanted to express the importance of having the public see it, right? I expressed to folks, I was out at the rally today, to be completely transparent with you all, and I expressed that it is important for us to reflect the conversations that we have here. We've talked to Chief, talked to Sergeant Brewer, and I think transparency is something that's really important. I think this is part of that transparency. We're not asking to see anything that's outside of what actually happened. I've heard not just from Chief Jones, but also today from Assistant Chief Patil that, the camera is a camera and the naked eye is different when you're there in person. And while I understand that, right, we haven't been in those situations, but I've said this before, there are the de-escalation tactics that you all have implemented in the past that I have seen done successfully. And so I want to see this because I want to know where we went wrong, right? I think that is important to know, and not if we went wrong, but really what happened. So it's just for transparency's sake. This is not to start pointing fingers, to start saying who did what. This is for transparency's sake, for the community to understand that there is nothing to be hidden. The truth is the truth, and that's what it's going to be. And so just to be clear, we're not asking for something that's outside of what should be happening. We're asking for something that already happened, right? And we just want to see it because we know it's important for the safety of our community.
Agree, Madam Vice Chair. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question. This is
Okay.
Robert.
People who are seeking recognition.
Sorry, Sergeant Brewer.
I'm sorry, I'm on a phone. It's a bit difficult.
Sorry, Sergeant Brewer, and then I'll go to Robin. Sorry about that.
I also can't see raised hands. I'm sorry, Sergeant Brewer. I can't see raised hands. I don't have that.
Nor can I.
It's really just a matter of procedure. If the body worn camera is released to us, doesn't it, since we have open meetings, doesn't it get released to the public too? If the request is made, it's just really a procedure issue.
Well, and that's why Ms. Branson suggested that we would review it under like an executive session or something like that, like a closed session essentially. Ms. Sergeant Brewer, I saw your face and you don't hide your face well. So what was that?
No, I understand. I guess I think to go with to Nadia's saying, I mean, it's something that the police department releases when they release. I don't have a say in that, but I understand. I understand what everybody's saying.
Yeah. Chief Patel, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Yeah, so thank you. So and I know the conversation is still ongoing. What I would offer is every entity that we have to show the video before we show the public delays it getting to the public. So from the standpoint of seeing the video to analyze, what happened, what went well, what didn't go well, all those different things, I would just offer, like, do you need to see it before the public sees it, or do you just need to see it? Because we're trying to find that balance to get it out in the most timely, expedient manner as possible. But like our first layer that we will always do is give the family first right to, of refusal, basically, right? So we've done that. Then we're working with the Howard County State's Attorney's Office stuff to ensure the integrity of the investigation, because they're ultimately overall in charge of the criminal review of this. So I would just offer that it just, getting everybody together and doing it, it just adds one more layer that then prevents it getting to the public. So we're going to release it, and certainly, if you all feel as a group, you need to send a letter, like I understand all that. I would just offer that suggested it just adds one more layer of delay. I don't know procedurally. I'm sure Susan and Carlos can figure out procedurally how you all do, a closed meeting, all that. I'm certainly not an expert in that stuff, but that's it.
Okay. These are all really good concerns, right? And Alicia, I saw you nodding. Carlos, go ahead. Sorry.
Just one thing about a closed session. Yeah, I mean, public bodies can hold closed sessions, but they're under very specific circumstances. So I don't remember all of the circumstances. So I'd have to get back to you all on that, if that's the way that you want to proceed, or yeah.
Okay. So then what Nadia and I
No, I need to say something too.
Go ahead, Robin.
I don't really understand why we need to see this separately from the public. In fact, I think to be honest, it puts us in a very difficult position that we've seen stuff, but we can't really talk about it, or we might be able to talk about it, but we can't show it to people. I just don't see the purpose. I mean, yes, everybody should see it. I agree totally with Nadia that this should be made public as soon as possible. And I think Assistant Chief Patel has said the same thing. So I just don't see why we would put ourselves into the middle of this process.
That's fair. Nadia, I saw your hand up.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to clarify. I guess that I can move on that to say that we want to write a letter saying that we want this and support the community, because the community is also asking for it to be released, and say that we also want this to be released to the public. I think I'm hearing everyone. We don't want to add a layer or add another barrier for this to be released, or to be an excuse, really, if I could be frank with you all. But I think we should definitely say, as the commission that's been assigned to represent the voice of folks in the community when it comes to policing in the county, we want this to be released to the public.
If I may, Davin, just to echo Chief Patel, who's I think said it perfectly, comments is, it is our intention and the chief's intention to release the body worn camera. We're trying to do that as soon as possible. If you all, as a collective body, want to write a letter or a statement requesting us to do so, we obviously encourage that, and that is your right. But know that there is no instance here where we are not going, at some point within the next few days or weeks, depending on, as what Chief Patel said, the investigation unfolds, we're going to release the video. This is not a hide and seek game. So we're committed to that. We're committed to transparency, and we're committed to showing all of you. So we we're happy to do that. And we're happy to take your statement if you feel
Okay.
that's necessary.
Okay, so then what I will ask is for the PAC. Oh, go ahead, Robin.
I put my hand up. I don't know.
Oh,
if it's-
Mr. Rick, sorry, I didn't see it. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, unless they saw it today, I don't think the county council has seen it yet.
They have not.
I mean, I don't see where we would have to see it before everybody else, you know, so.
Okay, I think and that's
They were
why we-
all in agreement on that.
yeah.
We're all in agreement.
Yeah, I think, and it's good that we had the conversation because I think that helps. Okay, so I want to take a vote on this so that way we can at least have it documented what our next step is from this. So in the chat, okay, with an aye or a nay, commissioners, please vote on whether we should, us as the PAC, should write a letter supporting the release of the body worn camera to the public as soon as possible. Not having it released explicitly to just us, saying that we support the body camera footage being released to the public as soon as possible. Please feel free to vote in aye. And then to Eric's point, which I think is a good one, and Chief Patel, you know I like you, so this isn't a jab at you. But if you guys delay or seem to be redacting the footage, then the letter becomes different at that point. But we'll cross that bridge. We're not going to get to it. You guys are going to be fine. But PAC commissioners, please vote in the chat if you support us writing a statement supporting the release of the body camera footage to the public. Look at that, guys. Look at all those yeses.
Master
Mr. Chair is fine. Master Chair throws
Mr.
us
Chair,
off.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to add as well, and I'm done, that according to preliminary news release, there was 30 minutes of de-escalation efforts by the police. And if we could somehow get a representative of the Gaithersburg Police Force to speak with us, because according to Captain Coquinos, Montgomery County does not train Gaithersburg Police. Gaithersburg Police, we've offered training to them, but so I think that that's very interesting because I would like to know what the difference is in the training for de-escalation for Montgomery County PD is versus Gaithersburg training. I would like to know that.
So if I may, because Sergeant Brewer's on it, but I have a question because so Chief Patel, is that accurate? Is that accurate as far as you know, or?
So I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna let Sergeant Brewer speak to. Obviously, she works at Training Academy. So many times, Gaithersburg City police officers who are brand new go through our police academy. Some of that depends on hiring timing. Sometimes the Gaithersburg City Police will train, with another academy, depending on how the hiring cycle is going. I believe, and Kate can fill this in, I believe they may do their own in-service training, but the one thing I'll offer is, and I don't know all the complete fact, but I will just say this, the circumstances in the Gaithersburg City plainclothes shooting are very, very different from a subject who was in a car that wasn't moving, that has been sitting in a drive-through line for well over an hour, probably an hour and a half to 2 hours. It's a very different dynamic than encountering somebody on the street who's armed on foot. It's just, they're two completely different things. And de-escalation also takes an active participant on the other side of that, right? And so without getting, diving too far deep here, we were prepared Friday night to stay there for hours and hours and hours. That's not a problem. But it takes communication to take, there's a lot that goes through it. So I would just caution not to compare those two things. And I'll turn it over to Kate to talk about what she knows of the city's training.
Go ahead, Sergeant Brewer.
Thanks, Chief. So Gaithersburg City does come to our in-service training. They do additional separate training on their own. So some of the, I think what Captain Coquinos was referring to was if they do any additional plainclothes training, that's something they do on their own. They do come to our in-service. They go through our in-service training. There's quite a few that are going through that are offered to and come to our academy and go through our academy training as well. So we do train Gaithersburg City. However, as it was mentioned in the text here by Mr. Sterling, it is Gaithersburg City itself is a small municipality. It's not the entire, everybody that falls under the address of Gaithersburg. So for example, my address is actually falls under Gaithersburg, but it's really not covered by Gaithersburg City. This event involved Montgomery County police officers. So it happened in a Gaithersburg area, but it involves Montgomery County police officers. It didn't involve Gaithersburg City, just for clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, because I was confused. What did that have to do with what we were discussing?
Yeah, and I think that's actually really, really helpful because I too also shared some of that confusion also. Okay, great. So we have the ayes have it. Carlos, am I right on us writing and releasing a statement supporting the release of the body worn camera footage?
You have 7 ayes, but not everyone voted. Can everyone just vote aye, nay, or abstain, just for the record? That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Please and thank you.
I think the only person that I don't have a vote from is Justice. I don't know if he's still on.
He voted aye.
He did?
Justice voted aye.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I voted aye. Sorry.
Great.
I don't know if you saw it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So what we will do, Nadia and I will draft the statement, send it to the PAC, and then once you guys review it and sign off on it, then we'll get that over. And as promised, I am letting you leave early, just by 1 minute. But as promised, we are ending early. Guys, thank you so much for all your work. We'll make sure you guys get the recommendations specific to your subcommittees before the end of the week.
I just have one question.
Mr. Ricks, I was trying to get us out of here before 8.
And this is a short question.
Okay.
What happens if they release the body cam before y'all get the letter?
Then we won't be releasing the letter.
Then thank you. And it wasn't necessary in the beginning. Thank you.
Everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful night, and we will see you guys next week for our very short 30-minute meeting. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. All right, night. Bye, guys.